I want to welcome members of the media and to say to you that we've asked you to come today so that we can give you an update on the progress that is being made with Project Future, the government's program to make Caymanian public services more efficient and effective and support a drive for the long-term sustainability of public finances. I want to start by introducing the other members of the panel who are with me. To my immediate right is the Honourable Deputy Governor, Mr. Franz Manderson. And over to his right is Mrs. Mary Rodriguez, who is the Chief Advisor for the strategic reforms. And to my left, someone who you would not have known, Kieran Stigant, about whom I will say more in a little while. Addressing Project Future, which is really the government's reform or rationalization agenda. I just want to repeat, since it's been a while since we last talked about this, some of the objectives of this exercise. The government is committed to driving forward changes to improve both the efficiency and effectiveness of government activity. We have launched Project Future, which will be the program to deliver those changes. While we have achieved progress in some key areas, again about which I will talk a bit more shortly, the scope and detail of much of Project Future are still being considered. The government will not rush into changes which will potentially have far-reaching impact on public service. These are important reforms for the future of our islands. We are determined to get them right rather than rushing to decisions, and it does mean that we do need to invest time and resources upfront to getting in place the things that will allow us to implement strategic changes successfully. I want to talk a little bit about the EY report. I think I need to take this opportunity to be clear about the status of the EY report. The EY report is a series of recommendations to the government, but the agenda for change will be set by the government's economic and social priorities. This government has welcomed the EY report as a useful stimulus to our thinking, providing a helpful challenge to our existing ways of working. The 80+ recommendations from EY are a toolkit from which we can draw as we develop our own program of reform. Given the range of their work, it is inevitable that EY's recommendations include those that will be taken up in their entirety, and equally those that are clearly unacceptable. For example, I have already ruled out selling off the Water Authority, though the government is considering further options for the sewerage business section. Progress to date. Recently, concerns have been expressed in some media about an apparent lack of progress over the last 6 months. While we remain committed to taking the time necessary to get things right, it is simply not true to say that nothing has happened. As we have noted previously, the work EY carried out validated a number of projects that were already in flight. For example, those looking at new approaches to waste collection and disposal. Work has continued on those projects. In addition, work is well underway on a number of other projects that flow from EY's recommendations. I say flow from because they take account of EY's work, but the implementation may be in a modified form to suit our political direction rather than simply implementing a recommendation. I'm going to talk briefly about 6 areas of work that are now well underway. First, Cabinet has agreed that the case for the office of a National Ombudsman and bringing together the work of the Complaints Commission and the Information Commission Office should be taken to the next stage. This central office will also take on police public complaints and the provision of services as required, or I should say as will be required by the new data protection law. A business case is currently being drawn up for the change. Secondly, the government will be moving ahead with the sale of certain excess property holdings. However, as I previously announced, the government will not be supporting the EY recommendation to sell the government administration building. The development of a proper business case for a program of such sales, that is with respect to the excess government property holdings, is underway. Thirdly, caucus has considered proposals for the merger of primary schools in the BRAC, and we have asked the Chief Officer to look at further options. Detailed proposals are being drawn up, which will be brought forward to the communities affected in due course. Fourthly, the announcement I made in respect of not following EY's recommendation to sell off Radio Cayman has sometimes been portrayed as an example of inaction by the government. In fact, EY also recommended changes to government information services. The government has responded to both recommendations by initiating work to bring together and modernize the whole of government communication activity in order to make it more effective. Experts from the United Kingdom will be with us shortly to help move that project forward, all very far from inaction. Indeed, I can say that a team from the UK Cabinet Office arrives on Monday. Fifthly, the government has approved the proposal to raise the retirement age within the civil service to 65 and is now considering the business case options for the implementation of this decision. Finally, the government is minded to progress the EY proposal for a single Public Utilities Commission to act as a regulator of all public utilities. This is a complex change that will require necessary changes to the respective pieces of legislation that govern the various utilities. We have recently appointed an external consultant with expertise needed to develop the proposals to the next stage, and we expect to have those proposals within the course of the next 2 months. Civil service support arrangements. From that positive start, we are determined to push ahead with our reform agenda. The progress I've just outlined demonstrates that we are now pushing firmly into the implementation stage. As I said previously, it is clear that we need to put in place the proper support to ensure we implement the wide range of changes that will make up Project Future, and crucially, that we deliver the benefits from the program. We have already created a dedicated team led by Mrs. Rodriguez to guide and support implementation. The Deputy Governor and Ms. Rodriguez will give you an update shortly on the work that they have carried out over the last 6 months. Political support arrangements. In parallel with that, we have appointed Kieran Stigant to act as Special Advisor to the Premier, Cabinet and Caucus. Kieran brings with him a wealth of relevant experience and expertise from his career as a Chief Officer and then Chief Executive in one of the United Kingdom's largest local authorities. This includes the leadership of a program that delivered over £100 million of savings over a 3-year period. Kieran has a distinct role. He is not here to repeat the work EY have already done, and he's certainly not here to duplicate the work Ms. Rodriguez and her team are doing. Kieran will be providing advice and support to me as Premier, the Caucus and the Cabinet, and providing a bridge between the ambitions set by us as the political leaders of government and the delivery responsibilities of the civil service, so that we can maximize the value we obtain from having Kieran here. He will also be spending some of his time in supporting the work of Ms. Rodriguez and her team, so that we ensure we learn from his experience as part of a knowledge transfer into the civil service. Kieran will talk to you himself in a short while, but first I will pass on to the Deputy Governor to outline the work that has been going on to get the civil service into shape to be able to deliver effectively on Project Future.
Thank you, Premier, and good afternoon, everyone. As you have heard from the Premier, the commitment to change within the civil service and the government is real. We have the support of the political arm and the administrative arm of governments, which is absolutely essential. I want to, first of all, thank the Premier for his and his team for their structured and dedicated approach to Project Future and for their overwhelming concern for civil servants and their families. The Premier has made it very clear that any business case coming forward to them must have implications as to what will happen to civil servants and their families. Obviously, as head of the civil service, I also take that responsibility very seriously. But I want to thank the Premier and his caucus for that concern as well. Just to remind everyone of how this project moves forward, once Cabinet selects the projects, then it's the responsibility of the civil service to take the projects forward in terms of a strategic outline case or a business case. You've heard the Premier mention that as well. To achieve that, I will be relying on chief officers and who will be in charge of project delivery, but also the support of the Project Future Steering Committee, which you'll hear about from Ms. Rodriguez, and the Strategic Reforms Implementation Unit, which, as you heard, is headed by Ms. Rodriguez as well. The establishment of the Reforms Unit is a significant development, and as we have recognized the need for a strategic and coordinated approach, dedicated resources, and a robust implementation framework to give our projects the best possible chance of success. All of you will have heard criticisms from the Auditor General in the past about how projects are being managed in terms of project management and governance. That we want to be a thing of the past, and that's where Ms. Rodriguez and her unit is going to come in and to ensure that we're doing things in the right way, that we're providing value for money, that we're giving our elected leaders all of the information that they need to make their decisions. That is something that is critical for us in the civil service. The Premier and his colleagues rely on us to give them advice, and my job is to make sure that we give them the very best advice possible. Through Project Future, we have an opportunity to establish new expectations for the way we do business and to build capacity within the public service to deliver. Through Project Future, we have an opportunity to reimagine ourselves rather than just to make incremental changes. So in that regard, we welcome Mr. Kieran. He's going to be very busy, as the Premier has said, working with Premier first and us second in terms of providing advice, and we certainly welcome him on board. We think this is a tremendous step to ensure that Project Future moves forward quickly. I also want to say that we have not been sitting down. Ms. Rodriguez and her team has done a lot of work to make sure that Project Future moves forward, that we are ready on the civil service side once the government makes its decisions. A lot of work has been done, and I'm going to ask Ms. Rodriguez to please update on the tremendous work that her and her team has been doing.
Thank you, sir, and good afternoon. Well, as you've heard from the Honourable Premier and the Deputy Governor, they've set very high expectations for Project Future and for the work of our unit, the SRIU. And I'm pleased to be able to share with you some highlights of the work that we've been doing. They are highlights, and if anyone would like any further details, they can certainly contact me outside of this press conference. Happy to share. But I think it's very important to begin by sharing with you the mission statement for the SRIU. And it reads as follows: to establish an effective implementation framework for public service reform initiatives and to oversee, guide, and monitor successful delivery by ministry project teams to achieve a consistent best practice approach to change. So some key points there. The SRIU are not decision makers. As you've heard the Premier and Deputy Governor say, decisions on Project Future will be made by Cabinet. We're also not project managers or responsible for the delivery of individual projects. That is the role of chief officers and their project teams. Instead, we have been established to be leaders, to be enablers, to be facilitators of the implementation process. And as you've heard from our mission, we are responsible for establishing the framework that will be followed. We're also asked to provide guidance and support to project teams to monitor compliance with the framework that is established and to report on progress. So that's a bit about the SRIU. So how have we been preparing for implementation? I'd like to share with you some key areas that we consider representative of the progress that we've been making. First of all, we have accomplished the establishment of the SRIU. Cabinet approved the unit in October, and in short order, it has been staffed, it has been operationalized, we now have a team base, and we have been carrying on work. That's not a mean feat. When you think about the fact that one of the challenges we were faced with is to set up the unit through secondments. So I'm very pleased to announce that even within those restrictions, we now have a very exciting and dedicated team. It's a small unit. I have Dr. Tasha Ebanks Garcia. She's a Deputy Chief Officer, and she works part-time with the unit as the Deputy as well. We have Mr. Jay Atour, who is a Senior Internal Auditor, and he's seconded as well to the unit working full-time. In the past, we have also drawn on the services of the Manager for HR Audit in POCS, and we've also relied on the services and support of the GIS team as well. So we're a small unit, dedicated, excited, thrilled to get going. In terms of the things that we've been working on, we've already established a governance structure that's been developed, defining the roles, the responsibilities, the relationships between the different groups that are necessary to deliver Project Future. We have assisted the Deputy Governor to establish the Project Future Steering Committee, and in terms of its membership, we have ensured that it's very representative. We have senior civil servants, we have the Cabinet Secretary, Chief Officer of POCS, we have Solicitor General, we have the FS, and in addition, we also have representation from the private sector and the Civil Service Association and the Head of Procurement, the Head of E-Government, and myself, we sit as ex officio members. So quite a representative cross-cutting team has been established. We've also developed an implementation strategy, which has been approved by the steering committee, which outlines our methodology and approach to the project. We have developed program and project level methodologies, and in essence, that is defining how we in the SRIU will work and what are the requirements and our roles and responsibilities and the methods we will follow, as well as methodologies for project teams, so project management as well as program management methodologies. Work is now underway in terms of developing guidance, tools, and templates to support chief officers and their project teams. We've also established 3 technical advisory working groups. They include private and government sector volunteers, and really we've established them to do some of the heavy lifting for project teams. So we've asked them to research, document best practice and lessons learned in areas that present some new challenges for the civil servants, depending on which projects are selected. Example will be on outsourcing, mergers, etc. We've also established a risk management working group, and their role is to develop standard risk language, templates, and practices to support, again, project managers and to build capacity within the service. Risk management, how do we do it? How do we talk about it? Why is it important? This is an area that is very early, is in its very early stages of development within the service, and this is something that through Project Future we aim to take forward and improve on. We've also facilitated training for over 70 civil servants and in project management fundamentals and project management software, and that's included chief officers as well as ministry and departmental staff, and even the Deputy Governor attended as an extra show of commitment. And just closing to say that certainly over the past few months, we have really engaged in a lot of consultations. We've made various presentations to a wide range of stakeholders to get feedback to inform our work. And this has included the Office of the Auditor General. We're very keen to make sure, as the Deputy Governor said, that what we do through Project Future will meet the requirements and help to offset some of the concerns he has voiced about project management. We've also included in our consultations the Civil Service Association, chief officers, private sector experts, and most recently, presentations to the Overseas Territories governors, and also presentation to the Overseas Territories heads of civil service, again, to get feedback. So that's in a nutshell the sort of work that we've been engaging in. In terms of the key next steps for us, they include the following. We look forward to supporting this political public sector interface as Cabinet now works to define the scope of Project Future. We are preparing for program mobilization. As I talked about, we've started the process of developing templates, including business case templates, guidance tools for use by project teams, but also detailed project management guidance and tools as well. We're also very excited to be looking at partnering with the Civil Service College for further training opportunities. As I said earlier, we facilitated project management training, but in a reform agenda such as Project Future offers, there are many other areas that we need to tackle, such as contract management, change management, and so on. So a key principle of the way that we are working with Project Future is to ensure that we build capacity within the service. So looking back for the last 6 months since I've been appointed, less than that since our team has been established, I really have to say that it's been interesting. It certainly has been challenging. The work that we're doing, there aren't any precedents within the service, so we're breaking new ground. Deputy Governor talked about opportunities to innovate. That's what we're taking advantage of this opportunity to do. At the same time, we're reaching out to public sector, private sector counterparts to learn from them as well. And I believe challenges, yes, but we've made a lot of progress in important areas. And I'd like to thank the Honourable Premier, Deputy Governor, for the opportunity to engage in this work, to thank chief officers, our team of volunteers, especially the SRIU team, but the many others who have come together. We made an open invitation for people to participate in the tax and the working groups, and the response has been really wonderful. And I think it's certainly important to emphasize that there's a lot of talent within the public service. And we are committed through Project Future to identify this and to make really good use of this. And I'd also like to welcome Mr. Stigant. While his main role, of course, is to advise the Premier and his government, we're also keen to tap into his experience in program and project management to really ensure that our implementation framework for Project Future, that we give it every possible chance of success. So good to have you, Kieran.
Hello everybody, my name's Kieran Stigant. As the Premier outlined, my experience is from local government in the UK. I worked for over 27 years as a member of UK local government, about 12 years as a chief officer, and then 3.5 years as chief executive for West Sussex County Council, which, as the Premier said, is one of the largest local authorities in the UK. By profession, I'm an accountant, but I've spent most of my career outside finance, a range of roles from central policy through to being a chief officer for effectively all of the place services my council delivered. So things like roads, rubbish, planning, transportation, trading standards, community services in general. So it's given me a wide range of experience. And most importantly, perhaps, I'm well used to running the kind of programmes that Project Future is attempting to run in Cayman. As the Premier said, as Chief Executive in West Sussex, I ran a programme which delivered over £100 million of efficiency savings from our public services. Nearly all of that was delivered while maintaining frontline services. Some of it was what government would have variously called cuts, but the vast majority of it was efficiency savings delivered by changing the way that local public services were delivered. In that respect, I've got significant experience in outsourcing services, both directly to the private sector and to new forms of entity like staff mutuals or social enterprises. I've got well used to the world of living with contracted services and managing in a contracted environment, but also I'm used to developing in-house public services, both new directions, new innovations, and, where necessary, bringing back in-house services which have previously been outsourced. I first came to Cayman before Christmas when I was asked to do a series of workshops for civil servants. What I found when I came here was a leadership really committed to taking forward a programme of reform and a civil service equally committed to supporting them to achieve that. As is often the case in organisations trying to do something new and different, they knew they needed help. You've already heard about some of the work they've been doing to reach out to others on the island and beyond who can help them to do the kind of reforms that they're seeking to do. I believe with the experience I've gained over that 27 years in the UK, I can bring an awful lot of that to bear to help take Project Future forward. That's not to say that I believe you can just pick up UK experience and transport it here. I don't believe that's the case. Virtually everybody I've met since I've got here has told me what a unique place Cayman is. I can see that for myself. What that means is you've got unique challenges and unique problems which require Caymanian answers. What I believe I can do is draw on my experience and learning to help adapt that to the circumstances we find here. That's what I'm going to be doing with the Premier, with Caucus and with Cabinet, and as far as I'm able to do that, in support of the civil service as well. I really look forward to working with everybody involved and happy to answer any questions as we go through. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kieran. And now, members of the media, we are willing to take questions.
Good morning, everybody. Wendy from CNSAP. Let's have the mic first. Just a couple of questions. Firstly, Mr. Premier, can you just go over what you said about the mergers regarding the Information Commissioner, the new Police Complaints Commission, and I think you said the Office of the Information Commissioner. Are we just merging the offices, or are we merging the actual units, if you like, the role?
Right. The objective is to create a single office, being the Office of the National Ombudsman, under which will act as an umbrella, under which these various other commissions would now fall.
So they'd still be separate. We'd still have an Information Commissioner, a Complaints Commissioner, and then a Police Complaints Commissioner, or
I'm
not?
I'm not sure structurally how it will all work, but we are certainly seeking to avoid duplication or replication of functions. As I said, the business case is presently being looked at, so it would be presumptuous of me to say what those recommendations are actually going to say.
Okay, and the other question is about Mr. Stiggins. Can you just explain, are you coming as is it a short-term consultancy position? Are you employed as a civil servant or as a political appointment? And is the UK contributing to the costs, or?
No. Kieran has been hired on a 12-month contract, fixed-term contract. It is a political appointment. He has been chosen by me as Premier and my government to provide this advice. He's a function as, I think this is a term you'll be familiar with coming from the UK, as a special advisor.
Basically, who's paying for it? Is it
The Cayman Islands government.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a few more questions on the issues the Premier sort of ran through. On the sale of certain excess property holdings, I suppose, Mr. Premier, you can't say where those are, but can you give us an idea of the value that's being looked at? How much land, or acreage, or anything along those lines?
Oh, you test me now, because it's been a while since we've gone through this exercise. But essentially, the way we went about this was, we had Lands and Survey provide us with details of all. Vacant's the wrong word. All inactive. Let's try to find a word. All inactive Crown real estate assets in Cayman. And so then we sat down and we went through that list, and we took advice and guidance on what would be useful to retain for possible development down the road, for its utility, for its a whole range of reasons why you would, for conservation purposes perhaps. And then we wound up with a shortened list of properties which it was felt government and the country would benefit for those being passed over to private hands. So the process now is that was an exercise that was conducted by caucus. So that's gone away. We'll get the business case done on those. Once we take a decision, they'll be offered for tender, for public tender, and we'll see what sort of prices we raise.
The EY report suggested maybe selling $65 million worth of land. Is it in that neighborhood, or just too early to say?
Brent, I can actually find I don't think the number was that high, that of list that we had, because of course the EY number would have included things like this building, which is over $100 million, so which is off the table as far as we're concerned. So, but I can, I think, put my hand on what the number was, but I just don't have that information with me now.
A few more quick ones. The merger of primary schools in Cayman Brac, there are 3 there now? Is that correct?
There are 2 primary schools.
2, and they'd go to
3
one.
sites.
3 sites, 2
Yes.
schools, and they go to one site, 1 school? Is that
Right,
the idea?
that's the proposal, yes.
Okay. Radio Cayman, GIS, CIG TV merger. That I suppose this is no state secret. A bunch of us in the media have been invited to go to some conferences next week and give us our views on whatever.
Right.
I mean, but the government. This isn't. If all the stakeholders you interview next week, or the UK Cabinet Office interviews next week, say this is a bad idea, is the government still going to go through with this, or
if what is a bad idea?
A merge? I don't know. Just say if everyone from everywhere else comes in and says we think this is a terrible idea to merge these. I'm just trying to say how far along the road are you doing this merger, and you just think it's a matter of sussing out how best to do it, or is there's still a question of whether the merger is going to happen?
I think everyone concerned, not just those of us here, but the same folk that you refer to that are coming in next week from the UK government, understand that there is a significant deficit in government's ability to communicate effectively. Radio Cayman is one tool. Cayman Islands Government TV is another tool. Government Information Services is yet another tool. So the purpose of the exercise is for them to come, feet on the ground, sitting around tables talking to those who are involved, and obviously the local media is a key player in all of this, to find out what you think about the way government operates as far as communications is concerned, and for them then to come up with a recommendation about how government can best utilize the present resources that it has, and to indicate to us whether other resources are necessary, or how do we improve the resources that we have, or the utilization to do what government needs to be done, which is to have an effective medium or media by which to communicate its various messages.
Okay, so last question. Is the merger happening, or isn't it?
Which merger?
I'm sorry, Mr. Premier. You announced in November, was it? October, that the 3 entities would be merged into one. Is that happening, or is it not?
Well, it is certainly my view that what we need is a single communications unit. I'll be guided by what the experts say.
Okay, back to the
And
top.
I say that because of where I sit, not just now, but for the last 15 years. It has always been a major issue. I mean, the reality is that government cannot simply, nor should it expect, to rely on the local media. As you yourself have said to me more than once, Brent, you're not my PR guy, right? So I've taken that fully on board. You wouldn't believe how much that has stayed with me, and you're absolutely right. Government cannot rely on the local media to do its PR. We have to have an effective machine by which we are able to deliver to the country the messages that government wants to deliver, whether the media regards those as newsworthy or important is yet another matter. You make those judgments.
Back to the topic of the National Ombudsman Office. before she left, Nicola Williams made it very clear that she did not believe that was in the best interest of the country to merge the offices, to have certain functions happening. Space is one thing, the actual role is another story. Is that concern something that will be taken on board when it comes to this? It sounds like this is something you're moving along on. You said you're about to take the next step. Has that concern been taken on board? And what are the other commissioners, if you will, certainly the Information Commissioner, saying about this? Acting Information Commissioner.
Well, what I can say about what Ms. Williams said is that there are a lot of people who disagree with her view on that. I am principal amongst them. We are looking at ways to more effectively deliver on these key areas that are part and parcel of the government's approach to open government and transparency. But the replication of all of these commissions has driven the cost of these operations up really, really high. And what we are looking at is how we can create a more effective unit that is capable of doing all of these things without having to hire so many people, very highly paid people, to help deliver on these services. So we'll see. But certainly the view, I think pretty much the collective view of all of us from the governor right down is that this is something that we should pursue.
And the other potential merger, that is, of your different communication bodies, is that also going to include the various public relations officers you have scattered throughout the different government agencies, departments, so on and so forth? Because we know we have GIS, but then we also have various public relations officers that we go to in each ministry department. Does that include those people?
Well, I expect that as a result of the exercise, which will be conducted next week, that the team will produce a report which will address all of those issues. Because the big question really isn't so much about the merger of these things, is this the current system that we have in place being effective in delivering the communications for government that it needs? And if it isn't, how do we improve upon it? So we'll have to see what comes out of the report. I don't want to jump to conclusions about whether that is something that ought to be replicated right across the ministries, or whether it's something that we shouldn't have at all. Again, we'll be guided by what the consultants say.
It might be a bit early for this question, but I'll ask it nonetheless. With that one in particular, do you have an idea of job loss, if any, associated with that? Have you reached at that stage in terms of a report generated on that function?
They haven't even arrived in Cayman yet. So.
Okay, so we're not
Yeah.
Let me get the acronym right. The SRIU, the SRIU unit.
No.
That has not been looked at as yet. Okay.
If I could be clear, what the Premier has been explaining is part of the methodology that has been developed, which is making a business case before any decisions are being made. So as part of the business case, as we heard earlier, all the implications of taking forward a particular action will be identified, including any impacts, any HR impacts, but also things like costs, benefits, risks, those things as well.
Mr. Premier, this question is for you. And in your presentation, you mentioned the creation of a utility commission.
Public Utilities Commission.
Right. Will that commission be responsible for regulating the cost of petrol?
Indeed, sir. One of the driving forces behind it.
Right.
That consideration.
And when will your next update on the progress for the performance be with that?
With respect to the Public Utilities Commission?
No, the entire project that we had today.
Oh, Project Future?
Project Future, yes.
I'd be guessing. But as soon as there is something new to report, we certainly will do our very best to keep you apprised. As I've tried to demonstrate, and the Deputy Governor and Mrs. Rodriguez, it isn't as though we've been sitting on our hands for the past 6 months. But one of the things that I certainly and my caucus recognized fairly early in the game was that there is a dearth of experience within the public service in this level of change management. And I think one of the important things to do is to know when you don't know, and to seek out the advice that you need so that you make the right decisions. Because the kind of change management and transformation and rationalization that we are seeking to do is going to have huge implications for the country. And we need to make sure that we understand fully what those implications are and be able to manage the process. There was talk about job losses and so forth and so on. I mean, our objective is not to create job losses. From where I sit, and this is actually what kicked off this discussion almost 2 years ago now, I said publicly something I'd recognized for many, many years as I've been an elected member, is that unless something radical was done about the areas in which government is required to operate and the services that are constantly demanded of government, you cannot but expect that the cost of the public service, of running the public service, most of which it would be personnel related, is going to continue to grow. The efforts which were taken over the course of the past 6 years to contain public sector costs because of the state of the economy and the state of government finances, I've said more than once, were by and large, in my view, if not artificial, temporary in nature, because the pressures that continue to come to provide services and quality services and efficient services mean that you need to fill posts when they go vacant. You need, in some cases, to hire new staff. The way government contained personnel costs was that for a long period, except where it was absolutely an emergency, when posts went vacant, they didn't get filled, and there was essentially a freeze on public hiring. What has happened since then and what is happening now, and we see it in the context of the current budget, the pressures continue to build to fill more posts, and the concurrent cost that goes with that is something that we have had to seek to accommodate in the current budget. If government does not change in some significant ways the way we operate, that pressure is going to continue to be there. And so we really have to look long and hard about what areas government ought to be involved in. My objective is not so much, and this is me speaking personally, my objective as Premier is not so much to reduce the overall cost of government, although there is some of that might be possible, but I'm also a realist. It is to contain it and to do things to prevent the need for the public service to continue to grow at the rate that it did prior to the recession in 2008, because we simply cannot sustain that. All's well? Everybody's happy?
Mr. Premier, if I can just make just a one while we're in between there, just to say that one of the things, that the press will have available to them is a handout to accompany this conference, but also to note that one of the things we've been excited about with the arrival of Mr. Stigant is to share with him the work that we've been doing in SRIU in relation to Project Future. As I started off by saying, this is all new to the service, lots of new learning curves and so on. But I think we've been very pleased with the feedback we've received so far. He's done similar things, and he's given us the feedback we're on the right track, and there's some good things going. So I think that's been very encouraging as well to our efforts. As the Premier said, he isn't here to duplicate. Even if I tried to give it to him, I don't think he'll take over the SRIU anytime soon. But that feedback has been very, very useful, and we look forward to continuing that dialogue.
Can I just ask, just for clarification on the other, what you would describe as public utilities, so that there's no mistaking what you mean? Because obviously ICTA would certainly be one that you'd say, is it? Or
list for you.
Thank you.
I actually don't have the list of the various commissions here, although I do have one. But it would be the ICTA and the ERA, the Water Authority, the petroleum. Yeah. Right. But those are off the top of my head. I might have missed one or two. I don't.
Also, can I just clarify with regards to job losses and attrition? Can we get some idea of how attrition is working, if it's working at the moment, in terms of like letting people go when they reach 60, if you're now introducing 65, because that's obviously going to make quite a difference. We see people leaving the service at 60, but now that was one of your areas of attrition, so you're taking yourself 5 years off, if you see what I mean. So can we explain how that's been going?
Sure. A few years ago, when we were very clear to us that the government intended to raise the retirement age, we changed our policies quite a bit in terms of when people reach the retirement age. So right now, the policy that we have in place is that if a head of department, a chief officer, supports that person staying on in terms of there's no performance issues, then that person is allowed to stay on, and we've been giving them a year contract at a time so that we can keep abreast as to what was happening with the legislation. I think right now we have about between 160 and 190 persons who are over 60 in the service right now, and that seems to be working very well.
They're all on contracts, just to be.
Yes. So obviously, once we raise the retirement age, then a key part of our ability to reduce the numbers in terms of attrition will go away. And that's why I support what the Premier was saying, is that we have to stop doing that type of downsizing and look to real change.
That has to be some legal change? There's a law or two that has to change to accommodate that? Is that
Yes,
happening?
there has to be changes in legislation in terms of 60 is the pensionable age for retirement, so that would have to change, and we'd have to look at whether there are changes to the public service management law as well.
And there are also some nice constitutional points to ponder.
Yes.
Because there is a constitutional guarantee that civil service pensions will not be adversely impacted by any decision making. So I just give you those little teasers, really, to give you some insight into some of the challenges that we are dealing with. There is always, a great clamor for immediate change, but we have to consider implications. And often these changes do not happen anywhere near as quickly as any of us would like. And those who know me would know that I am one of those who would rather things move more swiftly. But we have to make sure that we do things properly, which is what we've striven to do and will continue to strive to do.
I just wanted to get some clarification actually on these job losses, because if the Premier said earlier that the goal is not to cut jobs, so the goal is presumably to still focus on this letting people go through attrition and not making people redundant, or are we now looking at genuine redundancies in general over the coming years if we're raising the pension age?
Let me take it from another standpoint, Wendy. We are aiming to, there are two sides to this. We are aiming to improve the efficiency, effectiveness, and competence of the public service in the delivery of the various services that it provides to the country. That's one part of the aim. The other part is to do so as cheaply as we possibly can with as few civil servants as we possibly can. But at the same time, this government has no intention, no desire, and will strive to avoid sending civil servants home who ought to be working, who need to be working. Where the possibility exists that you can that someone retires and the post is not needed to be filled, then we need to do away with that post. I don't think there are too many of those around. The way we are trying to go about this exercise, which I think is the right way, but it takes time and it's longer term, is we need to decide what areas government ought to be in the business of doing and which can better be done or carried out more efficiently, more effectively by the private sector. And part of what I was talking about earlier, there's also the other aspect, which is this. Over time, a whole number of agencies, units, commissions, whatever you want to call them, have grown up under bespoke legislation to deliver a particular service that the government at the time decided was something that the electorate would benefit from, the country would benefit from. We are looking to see how many of these, the managerial functions can be centralized so that you don't have this replication of agency after agency after agency whose function is regulatory. Let's use the commissions, whose function is regulatory, being carried out by a whole bunch of different regulators. In this case, we'll wind up with one regulator for public utilities, and they'll carry out the whole exercise. So that's the way we're going about this process. And as I said, that takes time, but that's the right way.